over end at a running rabbit pretty near as accurately as he could shoot the shotgun. And Alexander and Edmund's boy with tapsticks, and he with the gun, they went down through the park and across a pasture to the creek where Edmund's boy knew the footlog was, and he didn't know how it happened. Something a girl might have been expected and even excused for doing, but nobody else. Halfway over the footlog, and not even thinking about it, who had walked the top rail of a fence many a time, twice that far, when all of a sudden the known familiar sunny winter earth was upside down and flat on his face, and still holding the gun he was rushing not away from the earth, but away from the bright sky. And he could remember still the thin, bright tinkle of the breaking ice, and how he didn't even feel the shock of the water, but only of the air when he came up again. He had dropped the gun, too, so he had to dive, submerge again to find it, back out of the icy air into the water, which as yet felt neither cold or not, and where even his sodden garments, boots and thick pants and sweater and hunting coat, didn't even feel heavy, but just slow, and found the gun, and tried again for bottom, then thrashed one-handed to the bank, and treading water and clinging to a willow branch, he reached the gun up until someone took it. Edmund's boy, obviously, since at that moment Alexander rammed down at him the end of a long pole, almost a log whose first pass struck his feet out from under him and sent his head under again, and almost broke his hold on the willow until a voice said, "Get the pole out of his way so he can get up." Just a voice. Not because it couldn't be anybody else but either Alexander or Edmund's boy, but because it didn't matter whose. Climbing out now with both hands among the willows, the skim ice crinkling and tinkling against his chest, his clothes like soft, cold lead which he didn't move in but seemed rather to mount into like a poncho or a tarpaulin. Up the bank until he saw 2 feet in gumboots which were neither Edmund's boy's nor Alexander's, and then the legs, the overalls rising out of them, and he climbed on and stood up and saw a Negro man with an axe on his shoulder, in a heavy sheep-lined coat and a broad, pale felt hat such as his grandfather had used to wear, looking at him. And that was when he saw Lucas Beecham for the first time that he remembered. Or rather, for the first time, because you didn't forget Lucas Beecham. Gasping, shaking, and only now feeling the shock of the cold water, he looked up at the face which was just watching him without pity, commiseration, or anything else, not even surprise. Just watching him, whose owner had made no effort whatever to help him up out of the creek, had in fact ordered Alexander to desist with the pole, which had been the one token toward help that anybody had made. A face which in his estimation might have been under 50 or even 40, except for the hat and the eyes, and inside a Negro's skin, but that was all even to a boy of 12 shaking with cold and still panting from shock and exertion, because what looked out of it had no pigment at all, not even the white man's lack of it, not arrogant, not even scornful, just intractable and composed. Then Edmund's boy said something to the man, speaking a name. Something Mr. Lucas. And then he knew who the man was, remembering the rest of the story, which was a piece, a fragment of the country's chronicle which few, if any, knew better than his uncle. How the man was son of one of old Carruthers McCaslins, Edmund's great-grandfather's slaves, who had been not just old Carruthers' slave, but his son, too. Standing and shaking steadily now for what seemed to him another whole minute while the man stood looking at him, with nothing whatever in his face. Then the man turned, speaking not even back over his shoulder, already walking, not even waiting to see if they heard, let alone were going to obey. "Come on to my house." "I'll go back to Mr. Edmunds," he said. The man didn't look back. He didn't even answer. "Tote his gun, Joe," he said. So he followed, with Edmund's boy and Alexander following him, in single file along the creek toward the bridge and the road. Soon he had stopped shaking. He was just cold and wet now, and most of that would go if he just kept moving. They crossed the bridge. Ahead now was the gate where the drive went up through the park to Edmund's house. It was almost a mile. He would probably be dry and warm both by the time he